theme song. Hey everybody, welcome back to Uncle Cardboard's Limited Jamboree. I'm Jake Brown, aka Uncle Cardboard, aka your favorite uncle, and I'm here to talk about all the cards that went up and went down in the previous week of Crimson Instant Draft. That I think I just had a stroke. Innistrad Crimson Vow Draft. And there was some interesting stuff that happened. We were still a little bit too early on the data last week. Everything was just wildly trying to correct. There were some outliers in there. Here we're starting to finally drill down. We're getting some archetypes figured out. And we're going to kick things off just like that. We're going to start with Azorius. This is the Disturbed and Sky deck. Obviously, you're going to care about enchantments broadly. But it's not like you can't function without the Aura's Matter card. It's like an episode of Succession that doesn't have a lot of Tom. Sure, Tom's great, but I don't need a lot of Tom. All right, so number 5, most improved, up 0.7% is Fear of Death. This makes sense if you're broadly going to be in the sky, you're just trying to kind of neutralize some ground creatures, but I don't think I'm going all in on Fear of Death. I don't think it's particularly the aura you care about. Number 4, up 1.3, is an aura I do think you should care about, which is Cradle of Safety. I'm buying this big time. It plays at instant speed, and a lot of these decks are playing some combination of counters and card draw, so you can hold mana up without having to feel too bad about it, and you're basically just casting like a creature or just disturbing up an aura per turn. So I'm in on Cradle of Safety. I expect that to keep on rising. Number 3, up 1.6%, is Alchemist's Retrieval. This is another just piece of early interaction for these decks, or, you know, if somebody does play a big ground threat, just buying you a turn. It also works great with your own disturbed creatures. So, hey, you flip it into an aura, they go to kill whatever, that aura is attached to. Hey, bounce it back to your hand, you get to restart the whole process. So I'm also buying Alchemist's Retrieval, up 1.6%. Number 2, up 1.8%, is Piercing Light. Now, this is the second worst win rate on this list, however, so I'm not really rushing to put Piercing Light in my decks, and it's also not that great in terms of win rate. Ideally, you're not using, a random spell out of your hand to go and kill something. You're just trading with one of your early disturbed creatures so that you can get the value later, but keep my eye on it, I might be wrong. And then up number 1, up 4.8%, and this is the largest gain, but also the worst win rate on this list, Ceremonial Knife. This has been a controversial card. I do not think Knife is a good card. I think that it is an okay playable if you are a highly skilled player, which does not make it a good card. I think it makes it a bad card that just gets better when the right people put it in their decks. So this is also climbing up from a miserable 47.2% win rate to an even 52%. Now, 52% win rate would put it right about with Serpentine Ambush, which can be an okay card in Azorius. So I don't know. I would kind of, I'm not buying Ceremonial Knife in this deck. It's just 2 colors that have a really hard time making blood, and some people go, well, I want blood for hand smoothing, but we've had bad cards that can smooth out your draws, before, and we don't play those either. So to recap, our Azorius Risers are Fear of Death, Cradle of Safety, Alchemist's Retrieval, Piercing Light, and Ceremonial Knife. Now to our downs. At number 5, falling 3.2%, is Nurturing Presence. No! Nurturing Presence was such a darling of mine. I do still think it's a great card, but yeah, it was probably up a little bit too high. I think people are definitely valuing cheap interaction more than ever after we figured out that it's key with all of the clunky removal that is in this set. So Nurturing Presence might just not have an opportunity to get on the body. Somebody's, removing it in advance. So I would, play your Cradle of Safeties, play your Nurturing Presence, but probably in the reverse of that order. Number 4, down 3.5%, is Binding Geist, and I can buy this. I think people are really high on Binding Geist as, potentially a top blue common. It attacks well and then turns into kind of this mediocre defensive aura, but I am not really panicking if I don't get a critical mass of Binding Geists, because most of your Azorius Disturb payoffs are going to be for casting auras that target your own creatures, not your opponents. Cards like the 1/3, it's like Dawnheart, Life giver for that gives you 2 life every time that you cast an enchantment just haven't been cards that anybody's really looking to play. So overall, I'm shipping Binding Geist. At number 3, down 3.7%, is Gryff Rider. This is not a deck that is good at training creatures. Stop playing Gryff Rider in it. That's about all I have to say about that. At number 2, down 5.5%, is Nebelgast Beguiler. This is another one of my pet cards, as anybody who listens knows. That being said, I can buy this. Nebelgast Beguiler is just a little bit slow in this deck, maybe, and this is a deck that's looking to spend mana pretty aggressively. You are playing this more as a defensive creature as opposed to tapping their best blocker at end of turn and cracking back, so I'm coming around on being down on Nebelgast Beguiler. At number 1, down 7.2%, and that's huge, is Skywarp Scab. And I don't think this is a card that you want to be playing in these decks. Essentially, it rewards you for exiling cards from your graveyard that are creatures. The creatures you are putting in your graveyard ostensibly have Disturb. You do not want to exile those creatures. So, and I get the alluring upside of playing a big-butted flyer, but I would not be playing Skywarp Scab. So, again, our Azorius downs, we have Nurturing Presence, Binding Geist, Gryff Rider, Nebelgast Beguiler, and Skywarp Scab. Moving on to Boros. And again, Boros is just the color pair that doesn't really have much of an identity other than it wants to attack. It wants to attack early, it wants to attack often. It really cares about curving out well. Tied at number 5, moving up 2%, are Estwald Shieldbasher and Nebelgast Beguiler. Now, I will just say that both of these are still sub 54% win rate, so I'm not really happy about either one. Ideally, Nebelgast Beguiler isn't what you're topping your curve with. You're topping your curve with Falkenrath Celebrants and generating a couple treasures. You're playing Angelic Shieldmaster, but it can be a playable card. I'm going to look to see if this regresses a little bit. Estwald Shieldbasher, I have written at length on Star City Games. I just don't think that this is a card that is really playable in this format. It's too easy to answer, and you just trade. Your opponents are trading up on mana a lot when they answer it. At number 4, up 2.5%, is Heron Blessed Geist. This I maybe can buy as like, hey, if you don't get there in terms of curve top, then it does a nice little evasive game and can chip in for those last bits of damage. But this isn't a deck that runs a ton of auras, so you're not able to exile the Geist for those 2 1/1 flyers. So I also am betting that this regresses a little bit, might just be an outlier. At number 3, up 3.1%, is Lacerate Flesh. And I can maybe buy this because I think people are just playing too many Lacerate Fleshes. Maybe we're getting it. It's really, you want one of these at the top of your curve, and otherwise you're not ever looking to cast them in multiples. At number 2, up 4.3%, is Vampire Slayer. This I really think speaks to the importance of your curve in this format. If you aren't reliably casting a 2-drop, I don't see how Boros wins. And your 2-drop selection isn't that great. It's not, you're not like, oh, I'm doing it if I'm casting a bunch of Drogskull infantries. So definitely pay attention to your curve, and Vampire Slayer may have a home there, especially with Rakdos being so overrepresented right now in our draft meta. It's just a good call if it's trading up. The problem is a lot of the better vampires do have menace, so the, kind of just kill if blocked doesn't help too much if you're still losing another creature in that exchange. And at number 1, your most improved common, up 4.8% in Boros, is Lightning Wolf. This is a reflection of Lightning Wolf being at a sub 50% win rate last week, but it does have a win rate that's very comparable with Heron of Hope and Gryff Rider, so not necessarily a total dud. I would consider that you may need more 4s in this deck. It looks like your 4s are kind of just okay, and so Lightning Wolf, give it first strike because this deck doesn't have a lot to do with its mana, and Bash could be a legitimate plan. So our Boros Risers again, Estwald Shieldbasher, Nebelgast Beguiler, Heron Blessed Geist, Lacerate Flesh, Vampire Slayer, and Lightning Wolf. Now for our downs, we have a lot of cards because it looked like Boros overperformed just a tad the previous week. Coming in at number 5, we have Weary Prisoner down 3.1%. I don't think Weary Prisoner is a deck that you want to play. You need to make sure that you're attacking all of the time, and I don't think that you want to wait and take a turn off particularly to get this to a 6/6 in a deck that really needs to be enacting its own proactive game plan, not sitting around. At 4, down 3.2%, this is a tie, both Reckless Impulse and Fearful Villager. I think Reckless Impulse is still a fine card. I wonder if people are doing too much with it or just casting it incorrectly. I think LSV said it really well when he was like, I'm playing this when I'm worried about missing a land drop. It's almost like an expressive iteration that you just have to play well, but your curve should be low enough in this deck that you're not just whiffing a lot of time on Reckless Impulse. Fearful Villager, again, I don't think... little burp. I don't think that you are benefiting from the day-night swap as much, and so if you're playing a ton at instant speed and you're just like all removal and cool tricks, maybe Fearful Villager's okay, but that's really not your typical Boros deck. At number 2, down 4.9%, is Ceremonial Knife, and that is a sub 50% win rate on that sucker. It is not a good card. Please stop playing Ceremonial Knife. I know that a few people said it was good early, but those people were wrong, and they lied to you. And then at number 1, down even 5%, is Wedding Invitation. I think Wedding Invitation's kind of a cool idea in this deck if you get enough Falconwrath Celebrants, but just you don't need it. So Boros down again. We have Weary Prisoner, Reckless Impulse, Fearful Villager, Ceremonial Knife, and Wedding Invitation. Not great in white-red. Moving on, we had a good week for Dimir, and here's an archetype that's like really settling into what it's trying to do. A common theme in the cards that are moving up is that they're all still awful here. It's just, it would have been hard for them to get like much worse. So for Dimir, don't put a lot of stock into these cards being good. Okay? Okay. For our hot cards, coming in at number 5, we have Blood-Crazed Socialite and Sell-Off Entomber that are both up 3% even. They started out at 50%. 53% win rate, not great, even when you compare, like, relatively in Boros. So do with that information what you will. Number 4, up 3.6%, is Fear of Death. This deck doesn't really do a ton with self-mill, and also this card started pretty dang low in terms of game-in-hand win rate, so I'm not too excited about Fear of Death. Up 3%, or excuse me, at 3, up 4%, is Ceremonial Knife with a win rate of 49.7 total. That puts it right around Aim for the Head, and Dreadlight Monstrosity is one of the worst commons in Dimir. Yeesh. At number 2, up 5%, is Honored Heirloom, a card that no one is actively trying to cast in Dimir. And then at number 1, up 5.6%, is Unhallowed Phalanx. Again, this is not the Butts deck. Maybe if you have a Geralf and want to make a 13/13 flying zombie, I'm not mad at you. I also don't recommend that. So again, cards that I would not play for the most part, but it's worth noting they are, going up, and we'll check back to see if they continue to rise, are Blood-Crazed Socialite, Sell-Off Entomber, Fear of Death, Ceremonial Knife, Honored Heirloom, and Unhallowed Phalanx for Dimir. For the most part, the cards that truly deserve to fall fell this week, so I have no bones about them dropping, and they're overall just not very synergistic with what Dimir is trying to do. At number 5, dropping 0.9%, is Desperate Farmer. I really consider that a blip. Like, 1% either way, who really cares? I do think that Desperate Farmer is a better card in Dimir than this would indicate, so don't go dropping your farmers, but we'll keep an eye on it. At number 4, down 1.1% is Alchemist's Retrieval. I think that blue and black just doesn't hurt for ways to interact with what their opponent's doing, so Retrieval doesn't get you as much value, especially because your Disturb cards tend to be a little bit worse. I feel like white Disturb is really where you want to be. Blue Disturb's just a little bonus for being an exploit. At number 3, down 1.4%, is Grisly Ritual. This is just really expensive removal that I think people were like, well, if I have to have removal, I'll try a Grisly Ritual. And I don't think that you need to be trying it as often. It's really a one-of max, and even then, I'm only playing it if I didn't get there on better, more efficient removal. At number 2, down 2.4% in Dimir, is Cruel Witness. Cruel Witness, we didn't know exactly how excited to be about Cruel Witness, right? We were looking at it and going, hey, maybe this will be the return of the 3/3 flyer. At the end of the day, I don't think that you get much value off of your self-mill here, and that's really what you're trying to accomplish. I don't think a 3/3 body in the air is particularly impressive in this set, especially because it just runs right into Apprentice Sharpshooters, so overall, Cruel Witness, I'm down on 2. How about that? Data. And at number 1, down a whopping 3.8% with a 44.6% win rate, which is one of the worst commons in the set. Just at that number would be Wonderlight Spirit. Don't play Wonderlight Spirit. I can't see a scenario in which it is okay to play Wonderlight Spirit unless you are a super, super aggressive Izzet deck. I think that's maybe the one corner case where you might want a Wonderlight Spirit, but not excited. So again, cards heading in the wrong direction like a 2000s Lohan are Desperate Farmer, Alchemist Retrieval, Grisly Ritual, Cruel Witness, and Wonderlight Spirit. Now we're going on to Golgari, which is just kind of your basic, generic, mid-rangey good stuff deck. At number 5, we have up 1% Desperate Farmer. That's fine. It's just, I think you're looking at getting value out of your creatures. So when you're playing, Spore Crawlers and things that you just are like, okay, it's fine if it dies, then Desperate Farmer, not that bad. A 4/3 lifelinker is the real deal. And I think that this set is really showing us the value of lifelink and life gain overall. Up number 4, we're up 1.6% on Gift of Fangs. What this tells me is that I know green and black have a little bit of difficulty interacting early, and so just being able to have deadweight essentially whenever you need it against some of the faster decks sounds great. Doesn't feel great when you're in such a Rakdos heavy meta, but I'm interested in Gift of Fangs moving over, and it seems like that deck really just needs a way to get to the end game. Golgari is always hurting for just a little bit more. Just give me a couple more turns, and Gift of Fangs could get you there. At number 3, up 1.9% is Nature's Embrace. I also don't think that you need Nature's Embrace. Maybe you're splashing. It still has an incredibly low win rate, so don't stress about getting Nature's Embrace into your deck quite yet. At number 2, up 1.9% is Undying Malice. I think you have enough ETB effects in this deck to make it worthwhile, and you're spending a lot on your threats, so you need cheap ways to mitigate removal, and Undying Malice is certainly that. This deck has a really high curve. You don't just want to be out because somebody matched your high curve with a Grisly Ritual. So Undying Malice, something that I'm interested in Golgari. And then number 1, up 4.6%, is Honored Heirloom. Are Nature's Embrace and Honored Heirloom telling us that Golgari secretly doesn't want to be Golgari? That you need to splash? I don't know. Again, you do have expensive threats, so maybe you're trying to get your ramp here, but I would rather have Reclusive Taxidermist, Weaver. I would rather have the Statue. There's so many different things that you can do to ramp that are better than these 2 cards, but they are at 1 and 3 respectively, so who knows? All right, so again, that is Desperate Farmer, Gift of Fangs, Nature's Embrace, Undying Malice, and Honored Heirloom that are up for Golgari. In terms of down, we had a lot because this deck is just flat out not very strong. I want to say that every card here either has a win rate of 50% and change or lower. So this is a good idea of what we're trying not to do. At number 5, down a full 3.8% is Rot Tide Gargantua. Golgari isn't really trying to do exploit things. I don't think you want to play Rot Tide Gargantua, and there we go. At number 4, down 5.2% is Rural Recruit. I thought this might be a good value body for this deck, but it looks like it just way overperformed last week, or 2 weeks ago, so we are seeing it crash back down to earth, and that's definitely something to note. We'll see where this shakes out. At number 3, down 6.6% is Witch's Web. My guess is that Golgari would rather have the Might as opposed to the Web, but I mean 6.6% is very real. That also might just reflect that Golgari decks did not perform well this week. At number 2, down 6.8% is Aim for the Head. I think that people are excited about this potentially being a card, considering that this did look like a bomb-heavy format, and so you don't mind stripping out a Toxrill or a Hull Breacher Horror out of somebody's deck, but or Hull Breaker Horror, jeez Louise. I'm going to say Breacher until the day I die, I'm pretty sure. That and Dreadfast Dragon when it's really Dreadfeast. Demon, wow, okay, it's early. Let's get some more coffee in me, but Aim for the Head, not anything I'm excited about. And then at number 1, down an even 7%, is Molgraph Millipede. This was a card I was surprised to see up last week. I speculated that Golgari might be the actual self-mill deck. Turns out I don't think it is. I think Molgraph Millipede just kind of overperformed and doesn't seem like self-mill is a thing, period, let alone in this deck. So Golgari, recapping our downs, we have Rot Tide Gargantua, Rural Recruit, Witch's Web, Aim for the Head, and Molgraph Millipede. Moving on to Gruul, and this is just kind of your traditional Wolves deck. You're just getting big bodies out there, surviving until you can do it with a little bit of early removal and like a Braid and Flame Blessed Bolt, and then you're just bashing with your big dudes. Hopefully they're wolves, because there's a lot of cool wolf synergies. Here, for our ups, at number 5, up 1.9%, is Voldaren Epicure. This is not a card I'm excited to play in Golgari. It's still coming in at a 52% win rate, which is pretty not great. I don't know if this is a card that you're, just scrambling to put in your decks. I'd rather have Snarling Wolf in every case, but we'll look to see if Epicure keeps going up. I think this is just a factor of better players or playing more Epicures, because it was one of those cards everybody was kind of unsure on, and so maybe these decks are winning in spite of them. Up 2% to a 50.7% win rate is our number 4 card, Daybreak Combatants. I don't like Daybreak Combatants either. I think it just didn't have anywhere else to go. So just note, if you're playing Daybreak Combatants, probably stop until we know better. Then tied for number 2, up 2.7%, we have Crushing Canopy and Molgraph Millipede. This deck does struggle to deal with flyers, so maybe I'm buying Crushing Canopy as like a 23rd card, but I don't think that you are particularly excited to have Molgraph Millipede in the deck, and both of their win rates as sub 51%. Kind of agree with that. But we had a huge winner at number 1, up 9 whole percent, is Ancestral Anger. Now, I'm guessing, a 56.5% win rate is nothing to laugh about. It does give trample, which I think is huge in this format. I think that's why Might is seeing so much play. So I'm keeping my eye on this. I don't think it's right, but you're not really doing much else. You're really tricks and removal when you're in Gruul right now. So keep an eye on it. To recap, our Gruul Risers, Voldaren Epicure, Daybreak Combatants, Crushing Canopy, Molgraph Millipede, and Ancestral Anger. Now for our downs, coming in at number 5, down 2.3%, is Fearful Villager. Again, I'm surprised. I thought that this was going to be a pretty good card, especially with your emphasis on tricks, that having anything with menace and then a lot of tricks in your deck tends to be good. But we'll keep an eye out on it. Down 2.6% is Reckless Impulse. Again, you have a really high curve, and so it's tough to be able to impulse correctly. You just don't want to hit your Flourishing Hunters, things like that in Gruul, where you can't guarantee that you're going to be able to cast both of the cards that you get off of it if you don't hit a land. Down 4% at number 3 is Sheltering Bows. Don't play Sheltering Bows. You don't have to. I think your creatures tend to have bigger butts than they need in Gruul, so I'm not exactly excited about giving them even larger butts. There are definitely combinations where I could see this working, but I can't in good conscience recommend Sheltering Bows to anyone ever. It now currently has a 44.5% win rate. That's real bad. That's if numbers don't make sense to you. 44.5, real garbage. Speaking of real garbage, we have Honored Heirloom coming in the number 2 slot, and that's down 4.5%. Again, this is sub 50%. This is just not where you want to get your ramp from, ever. Don't ramp with Honored Heirloom, ramp with creatures that become relevant later. And then down in our number 1 slot, down 5.1%, it's Nature's Embrace. Oh, look, it's all of the bad ramp that people are playing. Okay. So I think that is some really great information for us, right? That in Gruul, you want your Weavers and Taxidermists. You don't want Nature's Embrace and Honored Heirloom. Just to recap, outside of those, we also had Sheltering Bows, Reckless Recap. Totally thinking about recapping. Reckless Impulse and Fearless Villager as our downs. All right, moving on to Izzet. And Izzet's kind of like turbo aggro. Spells kind of matter, but not as much as you think they would. You're really just trying to play a ton of 1 and 2 drops, get there with cards like Ancestral Anger, and just do some bashing. Coming in at number 5 is Wanderlight Spirit, and that's up 2.2%. It's still not doing great, the 52.4% win rate, but hey, listen, like I said, if you're in a hyper-aggressive deck, you don't hate getting in for 2. The not being able to block has no effect on what its game plan is, and it wears some Ancestral Angers nicely if you need to just be able to get in essentially to the face with it. At number 4, up 2.4%, is both Hungry Ridgewolf and Steelclad Spirit. Steelclad Spirit is not a card I imagined saying out of my mouth when we were talking about Izzet, and it actually has a 55.1% win rate. You have to have, I guess, the perfect Disturb package to be able to get these mattering. I guess your ideal play is like Lantern Bearer, bash, 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 and then you slap a Lantern Bearer on your Steelclad Spirit and get in for 4 once, I guess. Otherwise, it's like a defensive body that can stall the game, but I don't think that that's what you're trying to do. Hungry Ridgewolf, I think you just want 2 drops. 2 drops in general are fine. You might be playing Raconteur, so you get this up to 3/2, but yeah, you're just like hungry for 2 drops in this deck because you need that damage. Number 2, up 2.6%, is Fearful Villager. Again, this makes tons of sense to me. You're looking for evasive threats, and Menace can get you there, and you are going to dump your hand early with this deck sometimes, and then just be holding up mana, and a 4/4 Menace is a great way to make your opponents pay for stumbling. And then up 3.8%, the number 1 spot in Izzet is Wary Prisoner. That takes it to a 50.7% win rate. Again, that's not good. That's not a card you actively want to play. So that's just the data sorting everything out. All right, so to recap, Izzet, our gainers, like Gloria, are Wanderlight Spirit, Hungry Ridgewolf, Steelclad Spirit, Fearful Villager, and Wary Prisoner. Please don't play it. Coming in at our biggest losers for the week, tied at number 5 in Izzet, are Cradle of Safety and Bloody Betrayal. Bloody Betrayal still has like a bonkers game in hand win rate because when you're casting it, you're winning games. It's still, I think it's a fine one of, maybe. You don't necessarily need it, but sometimes it's just going to be lethal, especially if you're on the play and your opponent's stumbling after your fast start. In terms of Cradle of Safety, I just don't think you care too much about protecting these creatures. You're playing a lot of Epicures and Lantern Bearers that you're like, yeah, go ahead and die. Don't care. So I don't have Cradle of Safety as a huge priority for me in this deck. Number 3, down 3.9%, is Voldaren Epicure. Now, this still has a game in hand win rate of 55.8%, which is like comparable with Scattered Thoughts or a Kessig Flame Breather, but it's not like the world beater that we thought it was going to be. I'm still playing them. I'm still very excited about them, but this is really interesting to see the Epicures fall back to earth. Now, does that mean that we don't want to be aggressive? I don't think so, because I mean, our next 2 cards are both some of the most expensive cards, and I think these are really indicative of what you're trying to do. And Izzet at number 2, falling 3.9%, Dreadlight Monstrosity, a card that I have been down on and will continue to be down on. It now has a 46% win rate. Ugh, gross. And then number 1 is Pyre Spawn, down 4.8%. Also has a sub 50% win rate. You don't want to be doing big, dumb, expensive things in Izzet. Absolutely not. To recap, that's Cradle of Safety, Bloody Betrayal, Voldaren Epicure, Dreadlight Monstrosity, and Pyre Spawn down in Izzet. Moving on to Orzhov. This is just such a streamlined, efficient deck. All you're looking to do, gain life, get things for gaining life, attack and get value. Okay, for our ups, up 3.8% is Rot-Tide Gargantua. This is a little surprising to me. I think maybe you don't care too much about the exploit. You're just really kind of hurting for 5-drops, but I'm not rushing to put Doom Dissenters and Persistent Specimens in these decks. I don't think that that's your plan. I think your plan is to gain life and do so in a very linear way, but hey, it's worth noting that it's up to a 56.6% win rate, so not nothing. Maybe it's you're turning on your Desperate Farmers, and you've got to find a way to turn farmers on that isn't farmers only. So I'm going to keep monitoring Rot-Tide Gargantua and make sure that it doesn't have a pretty big fallback to earth. Number 4, up 4.4%, is Aim for the Head. This is a card that I'm a little surprised about. It also didn't have much further to go when it had a 44% game in hand win rate in week 2. Week 3 had to be good to it, right? Oh, I am not going to be playing Aim for the Head. This is just everything kind of coming back down to where it should. Number 3, up 7.3%, is Persistent Specimen. And so, you know, hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you do want the Persistent Specimen Rot-Tide Gargantua package in here, and there's like a secret exploit theme in Orzhov. I want to try it out. I think you should try it out because this isn't. I mean, 55.8% game in hand win rate for Persistent Specimen. That's wild, especially when you consider it is a 1-drop. I mean, 1-drops usually don't have the best, hey, if you draw it ever rate. It's opening hand win rate that they usually benefit from massively. So I'm checking it out. Honored Heirloom is our number 2, up 8%. It started out at 43, so again, nowhere but up to go. Don't play Honored Heirloom in your Orzhov decks. And then number 1, up a whopping 12.4%, is Vampire's Kiss. This is wild to me. This is also maybe a little bit of small sample size theater because I don't think people are really rushing to get Vampire's Kiss in there. But this would say to me that maybe you do care a little bit more about blood than I had previously thought. I mean, there are no other blood generators in this top 5, but that is a number. It's certainly a number. I mean, and a 56.6% win rate is tied with Rot-Tide Gargantua as the highest on any of our risers. So I'm interested. You've piqued my interest. I don't think that this is how you want to get your life gain. So to recap, we have as our risers in Orzhov, Rawtide Gargantua, Aim for the Head, Persistent Specimen, Honored Heirloom, and Vampire's Kiss. On to what is dropping, and this isn't a big list. There isn't a lot that fell. Orzhov's looking pretty, it's getting stronger, like a Rocky training montage, but number 5, down 2.3% is Militia Rallier. I don't think Militia Rallier particularly has any synergy with this deck, so I don't want to play one. Sorry, you're just not doing Orzhov things. At number 4, down 2.4%, just narrowly edging out the Rallier, is Undying Malice. Undying Malice is, I don't think there's a ton of ETB things going on. You might have a Diregraph Scavenger or two, but overall, I think you're just fine letting things die. So, Undying Malice, just like low-end combat trick in this deck. Number 5, down 3.7%, is Wedding Invitation. Interesting. This is a cool kind of backdoor way to gain life, but at a 51.4% win rate, I'm not too excited about it. I think if you have a critical mass of vampires, then go for it, but you have to be able to get that life link in because a lot of your Orzhov creatures just don't attack for much. So getting them unblockable isn't a big deal. If you can get a Blood Crazed Socialite and a 10-point, life swing off of a blood sacrifice, then cool. Number 4, down 5.9%, is Unholy Officiant. Yeah, I think this might have been a card that was on the up list last week, and this is just normalizing. Nobody's too excited about Unholy Officiant. Nobody's excited about Holy Officiants. This is just a card you're passing. And then down 13.3%, yikes, is Blood Servitor. Hey, you don't need blood. You don't need blood in this deck. Not seeing people playing Blood Servitor, and this is probably why. What a week it had previously, though. So again, your recap for Orzhov: down, we have Militia Rallier, Undying Malice, Wedding Invitation, Unholy Officiant, and Blood Servitor. Moving on to Selesnya, the kind of humans, kind of training identity-less deck in this format. It's casting a lot of creatures, it's playing tricks, it's having minor human encounter synergies, but it's just kind of a good stuffy deck. Coming in at number 5, up 1.6%, is Snarling Wolf. I kind of buy this if you really need your Selesnya deck to be doing training things. Wolf gives you a great way to start training your Perish Blade trainee on turn 3. There aren't any other ways really to do it. They're to start. And so you're going to pump your Wolf, free attack, you're going to swing in with both, and you're attacking for 5, which is not nothing. And then hopefully following that up with like a Traveling Minister or something so that you're still spending mana and not just taking a turn off to do Snarling Wolf things, because that feels bad. At number 4, up 1.9%, is Sheltering Bows. This takes it up to a 50% win rate. Yikes, you don't want that. Don't play it. At number 3, up 2.5%, is Adamant Will. Again, this isn't a super important card for this deck. It only takes the win rate to 51%, but, Adamant Will, you'll play it. That's my ringing endorsement of Adamant Will. You'll play it. At number 2, up 3.1%, is Nature's Embrace. Again, that takes it to a sub 50%, but this is really just the data figuring out what's going on with this deck. And then number 1, up 3.2%, is Ceremonial Knife. That takes it to, again, a sub 50%. It's basically even with Nature's Embrace. If you're like, oh, I'm so excited to get this knife, it's going to help me train. Nature's Embrace, also a viable card in this deck that would be basically the same impact on your win rate as including that knife. So, again, in Selesnya, we have Snarling Wolf, Sheltering Bows, Adamant Will, Nature's Embrace, and Ceremonial Knife, with Wolf really the only thing I'm close to buying, and Adamant Will just being fine. In terms of down in Selesnya, tied for 5th, we have Piercing Light and Rural Recruit, both down 3%. Rural Recruit was a little surprising, especially seeing it at a sub 50%. I just don't think it's your strongest training card, and I feel like there's a lot of things that can deal with your Boar token. Piercing Light. This was a card that I was like, oh, maybe, Selesnya needs a way to interact with an early game plan since it's light on interaction. Turns out this is just a little bit of noise. You can go back to not playing Piercing Light. At number 4, down 3.1%, is Griff Rider. When I look at trophies in Selesnya, I'm not seeing a lot of Griff Riders. It seemed like if you could train it once, it'd be great, but there just aren't a lot of opportunities to get 3 power on the board before turn 3. And so your opponent's just answering it pretty easily. 1 toughness is not great. Down 3.7% as our third biggest faller is Crushing Canopy. It's just a sideboard card. Stop main decking it. Down 3.8% is Bramble Armor. And this is now down to a 44.9% game in hand win rate, which is abysmal. If you were trying to do training things with Bramble Armor, perhaps reconsider that. It's just a lot of cost, but I don't know. This might be wrong too. I'm not fully sold that it's that bad, but it looked bad this week. Then our number 1 down is Moldgraph Millipede, 4.7%, and basically on par with some of your worst commons. I thought, hey, maybe this might be a deck that really cares about doing the thing. Getting a bunch of creatures. Going nuts with them. I don't think it is. I also just want to put some context that like the top common, Fierce Retribution, has a 54% game in hand win rate. So a lot of these numbers just seem low because the deck's not really doing that well. Even something like Hookhand Mariner is at 54%. And what I would consider a good playable in, let's just look at where something like, okay, so if we looked at Sporecrawler has a 52% win rate. Not ideal. So again, to recap, our fallers in Selesnya is Rural Recruit, Piercing Light, Griff Rider, Crushing Canopy, Bramble Armor, and Moldgraph Millipede. To Simic. Simic's a deck that basically had nowhere to go but up. Everything was down last week, so these numbers are going to seem wild. Just keep in mind that they take this deck back to like average. Number 5, which increased by 6.9%, nice, is Nature's Embrace. Again, I don't think you should be playing Nature's Embrace. This is not a Nature's Embrace deck. At number 4, up 7.2%, is Dawnheart Disciple. You might just need 2 drops in this deck. I feel like it's hurting for 2 drops, and you're not really banking on human synergies or anything like that. Number 3, up 7.4%, is Fear of Death. I don't think that this is a Fear of Death deck. It is cheap and an answer to things, but I don't buy that self-mill is any reflection of this increase. Snarling Wolf is up 7.6% in our number 2 spot. That does take it to a 52.8% win rate, though, so Snarling Wolf, not something I'm particularly interested in. I didn't mention, I think, that the Simic deck kind of plays like Flash, but without Flash, where you're holding up counter spells, you're trying to flip your wolves, and Snarling Wolf does give you something to do with your mana. But interesting to note that both Dawnheart Disciple and Snarling Wolf are both in here as kind of earlier plays that you might be interested in. Our number 1 gainer, up 8%, is Siphon Essence. Siphon Essence looks absolutely critical in this deck. It has a 59.2% win rate. So again, it really speaks to your ability to leave mana up, answer your opponent's threats, or cast, some kind of card draw, let your wolves flip, do the thing. Also note that Siphon Essence is one of the few ways that you can make blood in this deck, so it's probably you want some access to some blood. And then in terms of down, we only had 4 cards even qualify if we're not counting Honored Heirloom, which just completely fell off of the data entirely, and good riddance. But we'll just go... Oh, and just to recap really quick, we had Nature's Embrace, Dawnheart Disciple, Fear of Death, Snarling Wolf, and Siphon Essence as our risers in Simic. For our decliners, number 4, since that's all we got, is Moldgraf Millipede, and that's just down 0.4%. Skywarp Scob is our number 3, down 0.5%. If there's anything that's notable, it's going to be these next two. Number 2 is Repository Scob, down 1.9%. I just don't think you have good exploit targets in this deck really ever, and you're like, what are you going to go get back a counterspell? Ooh, you give them the opportunity to perfectly play around it, and you're just taking a turn off. So I can buy Repository Scob not being that great. And then number 1, we have Binding Geist, down 3.4%. Again, I think Binding Geist was probably a card that we missed on when we were looking kind of early, and I don't see where it's doing particularly well, so just take note that Binding Geist isn't a card that you want to play, or Repository Scob, Skywarp Scob, or Moldgraf Millipede in Simic. And then, hey, let's get to the best deck in the format, Rakdos. And we had a lot of pretty bad things happening just because Rakdos had won so much. It fell slightly back down to earth, just a little bit. So we're going to have a lot more to talk about in the downside rather than the up, but we do have 5 qualifying cards for up, and we're going to talk about them because that's my legal obligation. Coming in at number 5, up 0.4% is Pointed Discussion. 0.4% is like the bare minimum I would even discuss on here. I don't think that this should affect your evaluations of Pointed Discussion. Looks like it's a very good card in this deck. At number 4, up 1% is Ancestral Anger. It's not coming in very highly at 52% game in hand win rate. This isn't an Ancestral Anger deck. Don't worry about it. Number 3? I don't know where 9 came from. Wow. At number 3, up 2.3% is Wedding Invitation. This is a card I am incredibly high on in Rakdos. If you're playing it over Ceremonial Knife, you are doing it wrong. This represents huge life swings with either Celebrants or Socialite. It's just out there winning games, and I feel like for the cost of basically 2 colorless and you draw a card and potentially win games, this is a card that everybody needs to be playing more in this deck. That's it. Full stop. Number 2, up 2.8% is Vampire's Kiss. That's just a 51.2%, so don't be playing Vampire's Kiss. And then our number 1 gainer at 3.7% is Lightning Wolf. It's only up to 52.1% in Rakdos, so this is just more noise. Just to recap, in Rakdos, we have Pointed Discussion, Ancestral Anger, Wedding Invitation, Vampire's Kiss, and Lightning Wolf, of which I'm buying Wedding Invitation and Pointed Discussion. In terms of down, we have at number 5, Doomed Dissenter and Courier Bat, minus 3.2%. These aren't cards that are in your game plan. You're not trying to gain life. I mean, if you do, fine. And you're not trying to do exploit things. So I'm fine with everybody just taking these down a notch. At number 3, we have Gift of Fangs, down 3.3%. This might just be a reflection of how Rakdos heavy the meta has been. It has been so overdrafted compared to its rivals in this set. So Gift of Fangs is now at 52.5% game in hand win rate. I think people thought, oh, look, it's a cute trick for my vampires if I can't get anything of theirs, but it's still, I think, just kind of a mediocre aura, and I don't think this is a deck that's hurting for removal otherwise, so just take note. Down 3.5%, and our number 2 spot is Rot-Tide Gargantua. Totally makes sense. This is not what this deck's trying to do, and kind of fits in line with Doomed Dissenter being down. And then number 1, our largest faller, down 4.3%, Hungry Ridgewolf. You're just trying to get your Ragged Recluses and Blood Petal Celebrants in this deck. Ridgewolf doesn't synergize with what you're trying to do, and a 47.5% game in hand win rate would tend to jive with that. So again, we're looking at Doomed Dissenter, Courier Bat, Gift of Fangs, Rot-Tide Gargantua, and Hungry Ridgewolf as your Rakdos down cards. Okay, so this has been another episode of 5 Up, 5 Down. I look at this as we're still so early in the data that there are going to be these big fluctuations, corrections. We're starting to see some trends in some colors, others we're just still hearing the noise. And that's fine, that's what the early format's all about. We're not going to get anything that's totally significant yet, and that when most of the top commons are sorted out, then we're really just trying to figure out, hey, what's my best 20th through 23rd card? That's why we do this. That's why we show up every week. We grind. We do the limited. We do the grind. That was the worst Arnold impression that anybody has ever done. And if there is a world's worst Arnold contest out there, please submit that as my entry. I will split my winnings with you. As always, if you want to watch 5 Up, 5 Down live, we do it on the Twitch. I said the Twitch like I am a total boomer, but it's twitch.tv/Uncle Cardboard every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time now. And what's with this daylight time? I'm sick of it being totally dark at 5 o'clock. Let's change this. Start a petition after we're done with the Arnold contest. But you can come on, watch, and then I do a quick Q&A where we talk just more broadly about the format and what's actually going on. And then you can watch this on YouTube. If you're like, what were all of the cards that Jake was just talking about? I put the cards on the screen so you can look at them with your eyes. That's the only way to look at things. But if you have other ways, I won't stop you. And just if you like this, leave a comment on iTunes or on Stitcher is still a thing. I will read your comment probably. I don't have anybody to shout out this week, so I would love to read your comment. If you're on YouTube, subscribe there. I will not read your YouTube comments. That's too far. That's too much. As always, thank you so much to everybody for tuning in. I've been Jake Brown, aka Uncle Cardboard. This is Uncle Cardboard's Limited Jamboree. Stay tuned for a new installment of the Open Draft Project coming later this week. I'm so excited. All right, everybody, be cool to each other. Hey everybody, it's your favorite uncle, reminding you to check out the Open Draft Project, where I sit down with your favorite pros, streamers, and limited grinders. They do the exact same draft seed, and then we see what's going on in their heads. If you are brand new to draft, or you're like me and draft way too much, there's always something that you can take away from this series where we talk to some of the greatest draft minds in the world. Check it out.